Romans 15:15.
15:15. All right. It says, "Nevertheless, brethren, I have written more boldly to you on some points."
Who's written?
I have.
Who's I?
Paul.
So Paul said what again? Slowly, because you're reading fast too.
Sorry.
Romans 15:15.
"Nevertheless, brethren, I have written more boldly to you on some points."
So Paul said he wrote the letter?
Yep.
Read Romans 16:22.
Okay, 16:22. Okay. I, Tertullius, who wrote this Tertius, sorry. I, Tertius, who wrote this epistle, greet you in the Lord.
So who wrote the letter?
Tertius.
But Paul said I wrote.
Right. Okay.
So who wrote the letter?
Tertius.
But Paul said I wrote.
Yep.
In Romans 15:15, Paul said I wrote.
Yeah.
But in Romans 16:22 it says I, Tertius, wrote this letter.
Right.
Because in the first century, even now, you can have an amanuensis, the technical term, or a secretary writing for you. So Paul says, write. So Paul could say, I'm writing because Tertius is writing for him. So he could say, I'm writing. You get it now?
Get it.
Now go to 2 Peter 3:1.
2 Peter 3:1.
Yeah. How many letters did Peter write? 2 Peter 3:1.
Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay. 2 Peter 3:1 says, "Beloved, I now write to you in this second epistle, in both of
Peter wrote 2 Peter, said this is the second epistle?
Yeah.
And who wrote those epistles? Reread verse 1 again.
Beloved, I now write to you this second epistle, in both of which I stir up your pure mind."
One more time because you paused. Read it without pausing and read it loudly.
Okay. Beloved, I now write to you this second epistle, in both of which I stir up your pure minds by the way of reminder.
So who wrote these two letters?
Peter.
You sure he wrote two letters?
According to this verse right here, yeah.
Now go to 1 Peter 5:12.
1 Peter 5:12. Okay, 1 Peter 5:12. 1 Peter 5:12. 5:12. Okay. By Silvanus, our faithful brother, as I consider him, I have written to you briefly, exhorting and testifying that this is...
Who wrote Peter's first letter?
Silvanus.
Silvanus, right?
Yeah, Silvanus.
And who's Silvanus? That's Silas.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, let me write it down.
Silvanus is Silas's full name. Who wrote what for whom? And how do we know?
Okay, so 1 Peter was written by Silvanus because in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 12, it says, by Silvanus, and that's where we see it.
And Silvanus is who?
Silas.
And then in the case of Paul, who wrote Romans?
Tertius.
Who?
Tertius and Paul.
Yeah, Tertius, but that's okay. So you got it, right?
Yeah. Well, with the
so when they told you that Timothy wrote letters for Paul, why would that be a problem?
It wouldn't be.
Now, let me show you another example. Go to John 3:22.
Okay.
John 3:22.
Okay.
Read for me.
All right, John 3:22. After these things, Jesus and his disciples came into the land of Judea, and there he remained with them and baptized.
So who baptized?
Jesus.
John 3:26.
John 3:26 says, and they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who was with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him.
In John 3:22, who baptized?
Jesus.
You sure?
You got me nervous here, but according to this, if I'm understanding, yes.
Yeah, so it says Jesus, right?
Yes.
It didn't say Jesus and disciples, right?
No.
Right? Didn't say that, right?
Not in 26.
And not in 22 either, right?
No, because Jesus and the disciples just came to the land.
So he baptized, right? It didn't say Jesus and disciples, right?
Correct.
Now read John 4, verses 1 and 2.
Okay. John 4, 1 and 2. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples.
Oh. Wait, read John 4, verse 1 and 2 again.
It says, therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples.
So you see why it took me 5 hours to explain a simple point to you. What was the point? The point was, in the Bible, you're going to find that an author will say X did Y, when in reality, it was someone else or others who did Y for X. So it will say, Jesus did Y. But in reality, it was the disciples who did that act for Jesus. But because they're doing it for Jesus, you can say Jesus did it. So I, Paul, wrote this letter. But then elsewhere it says Tertius wrote it because Tertius wrote it for Paul. So Tertius wasn't writing for himself. He was writing down what Paul wanted to be written. So you can say that Paul wrote it because Paul used Tertius to write for him. That's how the Bible is written.
Makes complete sense.
You see how it works? This is called agency, where if I send you to do something for me and you do it, the person can say, Sam did Y, when it was really you. But why is it now ascribed to me? Because you're doing it for me, or you're doing it with my authorization or my permission.
Yep.
We got it?
I got it. We got it, yes.
It took me 5 hours to try to teach you this point. But let me show you this principle in Scripture. You ready?
Yes.
Matthew 10:40.
Matthew 10:40.
Matthew 10:40. Everyone understood how it works now, all you guys in Scripture? You understand that I can be set to do something even though it was someone else who did it for me? Because he's doing it for me, it could be ascribed to me. Now, Matthew 10:40, here's the principle. You'll see it.
All right. It says, he who receives you receives me. And
So if you receive Paul for the sake of Jesus, it's the same as receiving Jesus because you're doing it for Jesus' sake. So he who receives you receives me. And then go ahead.
And he who receives me receives him who sends me.
Capiche?
Capiche?
Luke chapter 10, verse 16.
All right. Luke 10:16 says, he who hears you hears me.
Hears you what?
He who hears you hears me.
Oh, there's that principle again. If someone accepts you, they're accepting me because they're accepting you for my sake because they know you're representing me. Read Luke 10:16. Finish it again because I got a few more.
Okay. So he who hears you hears me. He who rejects you rejects me.
That's right.
And he who rejects me rejects him who sent me.
You got it?
Got it.
John 13:20.
John 13:20. It says, most assuredly I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me. And he who receives me receives him who sent me.
Do we see the principle?
Yep.
You write for me. Because you're writing for me, it can be said that I wrote because you were writing for me and I wrote through you. So they can even mention you or they can just say I wrote it because that's the principle. Now, John 17:18, sir.
John 17:18. All right, John 17:18.
Even in companies today, if you guys own a company, you'll know that the owner of the company will have his secretary write for him, and all he does is sign it. But you can say, look, the owner of the company wrote a letter to us, when it was really his secretary. It's even that till this day. John 17:18.
All right, 17. You said 17:18, right?
That's right, sir.
As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world.
You see?
It's good.
God sent me, and I represent God. So when I act, God acts in union with me, because we always do all things together. So I'm not just speaking for myself, but for the Father. Likewise, I'm sending you, because you're going to act on my behalf, and I'll be acting through you. John 20:21.
So Jesus said to them again, peace to you, as the Father has sent me, I also send you.
With this principle, because I just forgot something. You just remind before you go. God will often say he did something, or an author will say God did something, when in reality it wasn't God who did it, but some agent, a creature who did it, but it's ascribed to God, because either God told the creature to do it for God or allowed him to do it, right?
Yep.
Now let me show you that, because now let's see if you can reconcile this contradiction. You ready?
Okay.
2 Samuel 24. Well, no, go to 1 Chronicles 21, verse 1.
It says, now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel.
Who tempted and enticed David to number Israel in order to trust in the large number of soldiers, and instead of trusting in God?
Satan.
Who did that?
Satan.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, but go to 2 Samuel 24, verse 1.
Again, the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah.
Wait, what? Wait. Who moved David to number Israel? 2 Samuel 24, verse 1.
The anger of the Lord, but the Lord.
Well, read it, dude. Don't guess. Who moved David to number Israel?
The Lord.
But 1 Chronicles 21:1 said Satan did it.
Yeah.
So God moved David to count the number of Israel, to trust in the amount of people he had and soldiers instead of trusting God, or Satan did it?
I would say no. Well, no. According to this, Satan did this. But if we're using the principle, then God allowed the agent of Satan to move it.
Not the agent of Satan. Satan is the agent.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay. So who actually moved David? God moved David to commit this sin and counting how many Israelites there were, so he can trust in the numbers he had?
No,
or did Satan do it?
Satan did it.
But it says God did it.
Well, the Lord allowed it.
Ah, you see how that works now? I, Paul, wrote. Tertius, I am the one who wrote. Peter, I wrote the second letter. Silvanus, who wrote this letter for me. Jesus baptized, but it was disciples of Jesus who baptized for Jesus. You see how it works?
Yeah.